Chicago soy oil provided spillover support, with European rapeseed and Malaysian palm oil also up overnight. Canada exported 128,000 tons of canola during the week ended May 21st. That brought the year-to-date total to just over 7 million tons. And the exports to date are up by 52% from the same point last year. Good seeding progress across the prairies and improving moisture conditions in some areas did account for some selling pressure, with recent losses also bearish from a chart standpoint. Markets in the U.S. will be closed Monday for Memorial Day, while the ICE canola futures will trade their usual hours. In the U.S., soybean, corn, and wheat futures are all higher, with positioning ahead of the long weekend a feature. Talk the U.S. government is close to reaching a deal to raise its debt ceiling was a supportive influence. Soy oil, it's posting the largest gains of the soy complex today, pulling beans up as well. July soybeans up 12 cents at $13.36 per bushel. Seeding operations across the Midwest are nearing their final stages, with only about 10% of intended soybean acres left to go in the ground. Forecasts are calling for hot and dry temperatures across the growing areas, and that was behind some of today's buying interest as traders put in a weather premium ahead of the weekend. Corn also underpinned by the hot and dry weather, with about a quarter of the crop thought to be dealing with drought conditions. July corn up 7 cents at $5.98 per bushel. Corn seeding is likely nearing completion in most areas of the U.S., with only the northernmost states experiencing delays. All three U.S. wheat markets are higher. Minneapolis up 4 cents in the July contract at $8.09 per bushel. Chicago up 6 cents at $6.10 per bushel, but Kansas City turning mixed, dipping a quarter cent in the July contract at $8.17 3/4. The more deferred contracts all still higher. U.S. winter wheat crops continue to suffer from heat and dryness, with some fields likely going unharvested. Meanwhile, spring wheat seedings continue to run behind normal. However, wheat crops elsewhere in the world are in reasonably good shape, with France pegging their wheat at 93% good to excellent. That's a look at the ICE futures and U.S. markets for Friday, May 26th. In Winnipeg for MarketsFarm.com, I'm Phil Franz-Workington.
1989. That was 34 years ago. And that's how long Butler Farm Equipment has been providing farmers in the Peace Country with industry-leading equipment. Now that spring is here, you can count on Butler Farm Equipment to have a great selection of mowers, including Toro and Gravely Zero Turns, 3-point attachments, and landscaping equipment. Butler Farm Equipment. A job well done starts with great equipment. To learn more about their brands, including Toro and Gravely, visit butlerfarmequipment.ca.
The opinions expressed during this show do not represent those of this station. If you've missed any of this show, you can follow the podcast at energeticcity.ca. Now, an in-depth look at the news and information shaping our community. This is Moose Talks with your host, Doug Craig, on Moose FM.
Good morning and welcome to another edition of the show. A little later on, we're hoping to be catching up with the Fort St. John Women's Resource Society. They did move to a new location on 96th Avenue off of 100th Street last month, so talk a bit about their new digs and what they need from you in terms of donations and whatnot going into the summer month. But first, after a few anxious weeks in Northeast BC, the danger from forest fires threatening people has largely passed. Now, to talk about where we are with these fires in the Peace now and what we can expect going forward in the summer, we're joined by BC Wildfire Service Information Officer Sharon Nicholl. Sharon, welcome to Moose Talks.
Good morning, Warren. Thanks.
Thank you so much for being here. Let's talk first about kind of the fires in the Northeast that really kind of threatened Fort St. John and properties kind of north of us here in the past few weeks. As I understand, the ones kind of immediately nearby are being held. Can you first kind of explain what exactly that means in comparison to out of control or kind of other statuses that these fires could be under?
Sure. So I guess just to go with the out of control first, that really describes a wildfire that is new. So not necessarily just new, but it's all fires are turned to out of control when they are discovered, and that describes a wildfire that's not responding to or is only responding to on a limited basis to the suppression actions, such that the perimeter spread isn't being contained. Now, when we're able to get resources out there, whether that is air support, firefighter crews on the ground, heavy equipment, that sort of thing, and we're able to really work on suppressing those fires, we can move them to stages like being held and under control. So being held indicates a stage of control that where with the resources that we've got currently assigned to that, as well as the forecasted weather on site, BC Wildfire Service is able to have a decent chance that that fire is going to stay within its containment lines. So it indicates that sufficient action has been taken so that the fire is not likely to spread beyond those boundaries. And then under control indicates that the fire has received sufficient suppression action to ensure no further spread of the fire. So being held can mean that you might see some increased activity or a little bit of growth within a defined perimeter, but we're not expecting it to go past those lines.
And that is that expectation kind of on a daily, weekly, monthly, forever basis generally, or is it only for kind of a certain amount of time, as long as the conditions that we're under right now, weather and whatnot, are sort of continuing?
Kind of a combination of everything, actually. So for a fire to be moved to being held, there's a combination of things in play. So that can include things like the containment lines, which can be wet guards that are constructed around the fire. The BC Wildfire Service likes to use naturally occurring features like lakes and roads as fire breaks, and those further reduce fire activity and behavior. Certainly the weather is a big component of that, so both the current and forecasted conditions are also considerations, as well as the available fuel for combustion that remains on the landscape, as well as the amount of resources, so aircraft, heavy equipment, crews that are available to be assigned on that fire really play into that. And being held really is kind of, I guess, an between out of control, under control, and then once we're able to move through those steps and follow the processes that are in play, then we're able to officially call fires out.
Is then kind of the ultimate goal is to be able to say this fire is under control, and then, as you say, out. Like held is fine, but we want to move past that, and that you'll continue to move resources and work on that fire to get to that kind of point, I assume, hey?
Yeah, absolutely. So when fires are moved from that out of control to either being held or under control, the BC Wildfire Service can reassess the resources that are currently assigned on site. And that can mean that we can either redirect or redeploy resources to places that might be in more need of those, or change our response tactics. So we're really doing what we can to ensure being held or under control it becomes the status for those, so that we're also able to manage new starts that we see.
Now, earlier this week, and I'm blanking on what day it was, but I remember the rain started to fall here in Fort St. John, and I swear you could hear a collective sigh of relief from everybody going, oh, thank goodness it's happening. That rain lasted kind of 2-3 days off and on. It was quite a deluge for at least a day there. How well would you say, and how important would you say that was in kind of improving the danger there was against the fire moving or spreading or whatnot, and kind of getting to the point where you could call it held at this point kind of later in the week as the rain moved on?
So I guess one of the main pieces of that is the rainfall really impacts the ease of ignition and flammability of the fuels, and it slows that fire activity, that fire behavior, and that allows our crews to be able to get out on the fire line to achieve objectives in a more direct manner before things dry out again. In terms of the impact of the rain that we did see, we saw a brief dip in the fire danger ratings because that top level of forest fuel, those like fine twigs and that leaf litter, that got a lot of moisture, so that took a lot of moisture. However, the deeper fuels, so when we're looking at kind of that medium woody debris and even those deep compact layers, so that's anything that's like 2 inches deep or deeper, those haven't been significantly impacted by the rain. So the Peace area in particular was experiencing a drought code 5 going into the winter, and those those drought conditions have persisted into the spring. So it's going to take quite a significant amount of precipitation to kind of penetrate all of those deeper layers of forest fuels. But we've already also now seen the fire danger ratings increase with only a day or two of the warm, dry weather following that healthy rainfall. So it's just really important to know that fire is as dynamic as the weather, and it can change just as quickly as well.
Mm-hmm. So then kind of going forward, I guess with, looking at forecasts as best as you can and sort of predicting the weather if you can, looking ahead, managing these fires in the North Peace, the Stoddard Creek, Red Creek, even further, the Donny Creek wildfire and complex. What does that look like in the coming days, months, or days, weeks, and months, I should say, and the response, the continued response from the wildfire service?
Yeah, planning is obviously critical to success. So the tactics and strategies that the BC Wildfire uses to manage wildfires depends on several factors. First and foremost is the importance of human life and safety, but also to the location of fires and the fire's proximity to values, as well as fire weather, fire activity, and available resource. So when we're looking at those fires in the piece, the type of continued response there, as well as other fires across the Prince George Fire Center, will depend on all of those factors. Response moving forward might be as simple as just monitoring the is kind of within that containment area. For those fires in the piece that you've just mentioned, incident management teams are still in place at those complexes, and they're creating updated response objectives. So when it's appropriate and reasonable to do so, the incident management teams will demobilize, and those fires will get turned back over to the local zone, who then assume that continued management of those incidents, and the planning and execution of response objectives happens at that level. And certainly, like the weather does play a huge piece of that. And it's, if we have a really cool, wet June, that is favorable to really kind of knock these fires down and be able to move a lot of the larger fires into a being held and under control status, and then potentially be able to get crews out on the landscape to extinguish those fires as well.
Mm-hmm. So then I suppose with all those factors in mind, it must be near impossible to say what the season's going to look like going forward in Northeast BC, in the Prince George Fire Center. I mean, can you even ballpark what the likelihood is that we could see more fire activity as the summer goes on? Or is it, as you say, really depend on the next month and how wet June is and kind of that kind of situation?
I would err on the side of saying it really does depend what June looks like. In terms of weather forecasts, the most accurate that we can be is really that 3 to 5 days ahead of time. Long range forecasts, the longer they go out, the less I guess, accurate they tend to be. So how a fire season plays out really depends on what happens in June. While we had an early start with the fires at the end of April and beginning of May, the activity that we've seen in the past 4 weeks, particularly in the piece, isn't necessarily an accurate indicator of what the rest of the fire season is going to look like. Mm-hmm. We're also now transitioning out of spring dip, so we're seeing a lot of our leafy, those deciduous trees really kind of greening up, and those provide natural fire breaks. So those aren't going to ignite as easily or be as susceptible to fire. But we're moving now into the season where more lightning-caused fires occur. So if our fire center or across the province were to experience that cool, wet June, we would find moisture in those deeper fuel levels. And if that were to happen, not only would it immediately impact the flammability and ease of ignition of all those fuels, it lowers what's called the buildup index, which is a numeric rating that takes into account the fuel available for combustion, as well as the moisture content of all of those deeper fuels and the effects of seasonal drought.
Wow. Then I suppose moving forward, especially as you say, we're kind of moving into the season where it's more likely going to be lightning that causes forest fires. What can we be doing as people, whether we're in Fort St. John or we have properties north, and around the city and whatnot? What can we be doing to mitigate the chance of forest fires, coming to our property or affecting us kind of going forward?
Yeah, mitigating risk is really a shared responsibility, and we can't stress enough how important it is for people, whether that's residents, tourists, travelers, campers, recreationalists, to ensure that their activities don't new wildfires. Human-caused wildfires are entirely preventable and divert crucial firefighting resources away from those naturally occurring fires and other existing fires. So what this means for folks is to first be aware of all of the current bans and prohibitions that are in place for the area that you are either currently in or you plan to be in, to know what the current fire danger is, those current and forecasted weather conditions, and then only when it's safe and permitted to do so, to use fire responsibly. So if that's having a campfire, ensuring that you're following all of the campfire regulations. If that's going out into the backcountry or using an off-road vehicle or ATV or conducting other high-risk activities, to be cautious and responsible. It's really important to educate yourself. And if you're in doubt about whether or not it's safe to do an activity, even if it's permitted, just don't do it. It's really not worth the risk. And when it comes to mitigating danger to homes and properties, individuals can play a critical role in risk reduction by undertaking fire smart initiatives. So a lot of really great information is available online at firesmartbc.ca, and you may be able to connect with your local municipality or regional district to see if there's a local coordinator or representative who can work with you to start the process of fire smarting your home and property.
All right, Sharon. Well, we got just one last question for you here. I know we, the media, look at this, this valuable service that the BC Wildfire Service provides, the dashboard, where you can see a map of kind of where fires are, the area they're in, what kind of their status is. And looking at it, even kind of at the start of wildfire season, we noticed that the Battleship Mountain wildfire is still on the map. It shows that it's, I don't know the status offhand, but we just kind of wanted to know about that. I mean, that was a sizable fire near Hudson's Hope last year. Where are we on that fire, and why is it still indicated on the map if it's seemingly either under control or had been put out because of kind of winter?
Yeah, so the Battleship Mountain fire is what we called a holdover fire. So when it was burning, it burned up just under 35,000 hectares. So as you mentioned, it was a sizable fire. It is currently classified as under control, and it's one of a handful of fires that do remain on our map from 2022. So those holdover fires can be a result of a large number of hectares burned, as well as the conditions on site, which for that area were extreme drought going into the winter. Fires can continue to smolder in those deeper fuel layers or move underground into root systems. So they can stay active throughout the winter, and they're kind of insulated with any snow that's on top.
Wow.
We also did experience a slightly below average snowpack in the Peace area. I think it was about 90% of average. So we didn't have a lot of moisture coming from the spring melt. And, with the exception of the last couple days of rain that were against up there hasn't been a lot of spring precipitation. So all of those things have really contributed to the current conditions, and having a fire that was as active as it was when the snow fell, we were able to have it in that under control state, but there were still hot spots and active areas within the perimeter. So to be able to officially call that out, we have to be able to follow our process and getting crews out there to patrol and extinguish every single hotspot on that fire. So it may take some time. We may see that fire stay on the map for quite a while this season as well. So it just really needs to have a process followed before we can call anything out. And really, just given the impact that it did have on the landscape, it may take some time to get there.
Does that mean there hasn't been anybody investigating yet, or that process is sort of underway?
It is underway. So the local zone has done some scans of the area. They are aware of some hotspots that do exist. And then certainly, if we were to experience, say, another heat dome or another extreme heat event and high winds, anything on any fire across the province, you would presumably see an uptick in fire activity and behavior, because fire really likes that hot, dry air. It doesn't like that nice, cool, moist air, and then wind obviously will help fuel the flames, to be quite honest.
Okay. All right. Well, Sharon, I really appreciate you taking some time to chat with us about this very important topic once again today. Thank you so much.
Great. Thanks, Warren.
You're very welcome. That's Sharon Nickel with the BC Wildfire Service. We'll be right back after this on Moose Talks.
What's better than camping in the Peace Country?
Camping and the Grand Prairie Stompede. Family-friendly midway rides, rodeo events, and the first chuck wagon races of the year.
But where to camp?
McGovern's Campground at Evergreen Park or Rotary Campground in the heart of Grand Prairie. Country Roads, Tamarack Park, and Nighthawk are all close to town. And there are even more across the county of Grand Prairie.
You pick. I'll book Stompede, May 31st till June 4th.
Grand Prairie and area campgrounds are supported by the Grand Prairie Regional Tourism Association.
Winter is over, and the sun shines on another spring. The memory of those long winter nights in a place that doesn't feel like home, fresh in your mind. This year, with the new season, why not look at finding a new place to stay? A place that fills you with pride and happiness. At Action Property Management, we have that place you dreamed about ready to go. You just have to take a look and fall in love. Don't believe us? See for yourself by stopping in and letting us show you the kind of place that you deserve. A place to call home. Action Property Management, 250-787-7177.
Are you looking for the right individual to fill your job openings? Become an exhibitor at the Fort St. John Job Fair, June 20th at the Pomeroy Hotel and Conference Center. This is an opportunity for you to meet talented local people for your company. To become an exhibitor or for more details, visit fsjjobfair.ca or call 250-787-7100. Presented by WorkBC Fort St. John and supported by CN Rail and Moose FM.
Have you ever wondered about the story behind why Monument in Fort St. John was built? Or who started the first hockey tournament in northern BC? Check out Voices of the Peace, a podcast from energeticcity.ca that answers these questions and more. Host Ted Sloan sits down with the people who make this city and region a great place to live.
He's helped bring the world's attention to a simply wonderful pocket of BC through his work with the Tumbler Ridge Museum and the Tumbler Ridge Global Geopark. My next guest is Dr. Charles Helm.
Go to energeticity.ca/voices to find out more.
After 3 long years, the annual Dawson Creek Kiwanis Trade Show is back. May 26th, 27th, and 28th at the Ovintiv Event Center. A weekend of amazing vendors, fun, door prizes, and food trucks at the Ovintiv Event Center in Dawson Creek. Vendor applications are now being accepted and are going fast. For details, head over to the website, dawsoncreekeventcenter.com, or call the show manager, Alicia Patterson, at 250-795-3334. See you at the show.
Crime Stoppers allows concerned community members to help the police solve crime. Your information, that small piece of the puzzle, can bring closure to many. By calling 1-800-222-8477, you are putting the spotlight and heat on the offender where it belongs. Your call is not recorded or traced. You remain anonymous while the offender doesn't. With your help, we are making the community a safer place to live. Call Crime Stoppers now at 1-800-222-8477 and let them know what you know about criminal activity.
Watch this show live on Facebook or download the podcast at energeticcity.ca.
Well, unfortunately, we've missed our guests from the Women's Resource Society, so hopefully we'll be able to catch up with them another time. We do want to thank our guest, Sharon Nickel from the BC Wildfire Service, for making some time for us today. Now, if you haven't already, we've got a brand new show on Moose FM that's aired 5 or 6 episodes that you ought to check out called The Trail Ahead. It airs on Moose FM Sundays at 1 p.m. and host Trail Echo talks about events, news, and stories from Doig River and other First Nations throughout the Treaty 8 territories. He also does the Beaver Word of the Day, so we can learn more about the Beaver language as well. You can listen to brand new episode this Sunday at 1 p.m. over here on Moose FM, or check out previous episodes of the Trail Ahead podcast over at energeticcity.ca/podcast. He has wonderful guests on as well, and he's had some great conversations over the past few episodes. Definitely worth checking out. Again, it's called The Trail Ahead, energeticcity.ca/podcasts. Well, that's our show for today. Jordan Prentice and Trey Lopashinsky are the producers of Moose Talks. I'm Dub Craig. Be well.
Join us next Friday at 10 a.m. for another episode of Moose Talks, a weekly talk show about Fort St. John and the North Peace.
Travel and RV Grand Prix